Hello, everyone. So my name is Rita Johnson Green, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. And I want to welcome you to our fourth and final discussion of the year of our webinar series called Building the Future of Regenerative Medicine, Executive Conversations. Now, this webinar series was born out of a number of discussions that we had with our board of directors and other senior biotech leaders who expressed the desire for ARM to bring biotech executives together with strategic suppliers to share their experiences, right? To talk about what's going well, the challenges that they've encountered, and most relevant to this discussion, how our strategic partners help them overcome those challenges. And so I want to thank you all for joining today's executive discussion. We have over 500 members registered, which is record-breaking. And so I want to do a quick plug for our service providers who may be interested in hosting a session in 2025. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors of today's webinar, Catalent. I want to thank the Catalent team not only for sponsoring today's webinar, but also for being such consistent supporters of ARM throughout the years. And today they are hosting our fourth webinar discussion entitled Commercialization Strategies for Cell and Gene Therapies. And this webinar will explore the critical steps required to successfully bring cell and gene therapies to market. And so again, I want to thank Delara, who's the Vice President of Global Cell Therapy and Plasmid DNA at Catalent, and the entire Catalent team. And I also want to thank the panel of experts who will be talking to you today, whom Delara will introduce later on in the program. And I also want to thank Kristin Yarema, one of our panelists, who is also an ARM board member and serves on our executive committee. And so with that, I will turn the discussion over to you, Delara. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. I really appreciate it. And it's really an honor to be here. And so, I want to say how much of a pleasure it is to partner with the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine on this very important topic and commercialization of cell and gene therapies, which is so top of mind. We are all so fortunate to be part of a sector that's bringing life-saving therapies to patients. And having successful commercialization is really critical to making sure that these key therapies actually get into the hands of patients. So I'm really thrilled that we have this incredible panel that are going to share their insights and experiences to help shed some light on important commercialization strategies. So with that, I'm going to ask the panel to actually introduce themselves and to give a bit of color of the perspective that they're bringing to the table. And I'm just going across the screen here. So Robert, if you don't mind, if you could kick us off, that would be great.
Thank you, Delara. Thank you to the organisers for the invitation to participate in the webinar and the panel. My name is Rob Allen. I'm a managing partner and the general manager for the EU with Dark Horse Consulting Group. Dark Horse was founded 10 years ago. I've been with the practice for about 6 years now. And the practice is the only global end-to-end, fully vertically integrated consulting practice focused on supporting clients in their development of cell and gene therapies. Practice has served approximately 450 individual clients at this point and provided support for the execution of about 1,000 projects to date. My background prior to cell and gene was in the biologics space, working at organizations including Amgen and Johnson & Johnson. So my background in biologics, I think, brings some more mature perspectives relative to, the evolution of this field as we see more products being approved. So included in my background, I worked during the launch days on ustekinumab, Delara for psoriasis, and also at the tail end of the exclusive life of Neulasta when I was at Amgen. So I'll pause there. Thank you again for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you so much, Rob. Sarah?
Great. Thank you, Delara. And Sarah Creviston. And for the past 5 years, I've had the immense pleasure and privilege of launching one of the first gene therapies for spinal muscular atrophy as a part of Novartis and Novartis Gene Therapies. It's truly been one of the best highlights of my career. And prior to that, I've spent most of my career in government affairs. I've launched 3 global government affairs organizations, mainly in biotech and particularly focused in rare disease. I'm a past ARM board member and executive committee member, And I know, Delara, you're going to ask later what I'm most proud of, but I'm also very proud because I was one of the founding members of the ARM Executive Women's Group. And I remember starting as a really small team of 6 people. And now I'm just so excited and proud of how that organization has grown as well.
Fantastic, Sarah. Thank you so much. John?
Hi, Delara. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be a part of the panel. Really appreciate it. I'm John King. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer and Head of BD at Vor Bio. I've been in the industry for 25 plus years, focusing on launching and commercializing in biopharma, rare disease space. The past 4 years plus, I've been with Vor Bio, which has been my first real entree into cell therapy, and been working with ARM. We're in the earlier stages of building and developing an engineered stem cell product for patients with AML. So thanks.
Welcome, John. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Kristin?
Yeah, thank you, Delara. And it's absolutely great to be here. I'm so excited for this panel. So hello, everyone. I'm Kristin Yarema. I'm the president and CEO of Poseida Therapeutics. So Poseida is really a platform technology company with products. We work in both cell therapy, where we do allogeneic cell therapy, as well as non-viral genetic medicines. And we are clinical stage. Our lead program is a program for multiple myeloma. We have 2 others in the clinic, all on the cell therapy side, and our non-viral genetic medicines are a bit earlier. I've also been in the industry now a long time, very long time, somewhere in my 3rd decade. Started in the research side, worked at the bench, was trained as an engineer, biochemical engineer. But a lot of my career has been in commercial. So whether pipeline work and new products planning, or running inline commercial businesses in a variety of different therapeutic areas. And I've done that both at large biopharma, such as Novartis and Amgen, but also more recently at a couple of biotechs, which has really returned me to my roots in cell and gene therapy, because that's what I did as a graduate student. So first, before coming to Poseida, I was the chief commercial officer at Atara Biotherapeutics. And that's, I think, relevant here because Atara was the company to get the first ever approval for an allogeneic T-cell immunotherapy, a product called Ebvallo, which is approved in Europe for a rare form of lymphoma. And after that, I moved to Poseida, where, as I said, we're working now on both sides. So I have lived the commercialization in this area, and I'm very excited to talk about it today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kristin. And so everyone, I think you can see by the experience, the shared experience that we have on this panel, we really have the right experts to give us some guidance as we're looking at commercialization strategies. So maybe before we dive into different strategies, I would like to just take a moment of reflection, right? We are fortunate to have a number of cell and gene therapies that are on the market today. And as we've heard, we have panelists that have had a hand in bringing those therapies to market. So, as you reflect on that and of, things that you're proud of, or insights and things that have been learned, I would just love to hear some reflection going around the panel. And maybe Sarah, we'll start with you, since you shared something you were already proud of, if you could take that into this as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much to be proud of. I mean, we've just come so far in such a short period of time, and I'm so excited for our future. And one of the things I've been most proud of and humbled by is, how close we've been able to stay partners with our patients and the patient organizations. That's one of the reasons I love working in rare disease. And my team, so I've been leading global patient advocacy, public affairs, and policy. And so a lot of our role was for, helping in the shaping. And what we learned is how important the early identification of patients that can dramatically increase the impact, the health outcomes, and then also the value for all of our other stakeholders and our partners as we're working to launch the product. And so my team took on the leadership of building partnerships globally to enact newborn screening in countries. And it started in the U.S. and built, the partnerships with our patient organizations, and now they're at 100%. And then, moved on to Europe and helped build a large coalition there. And it's all multi-stakeholder. And this is another very important component of being able to launch successfully is your cross-functional work together. I mean, none of this happens without our medical team, without our market access teams. And that's how we were such a cohesive unit going into countries. And another, one of our biggest reflections is just to always stay humble, because these are new therapies and it's new for everyone in the ecosystem. And so you have to come in and meet people, everyone where they are, and learn and grow and be open together. And as we were building these coalitions to help, shape the systems for newborn screening and the awareness is, we really tried to take that posture. And now Europe is getting close to almost 70%. Australia is almost done. Canada is 100% in newborn screening. And I have to say, it's not an easy thing. It can't just be assumed that you're going to get, newborn screening because you have a gene therapy or some innovative therapy. And there's a number of building blocks that have to be in place to make that successful. However, if you come at wherever you're going with that humble partnership perspective, amazing things can happen.
No, I love that, and I can't wait to dive into some of those pieces as we go into the challenges that are being faced. But that mindset of humility, I think, is so key, and the doors that's unlocked. That's incredible, Sarah. Thank you. Kristin, can you share some of your insights and things you're proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe I'll start with just a more kind of holistic aspect, which is, just wow, the fact that we have these therapies, that we have been able to commercialize, what even I would say probably even 10, 12 years ago, there was a lot of skepticism, right? Can a cell be a therapy that's a living thing? Is that a medicine? Gene therapy, we've been talking about that for decades as kind of sci-fi, and here we are. And I think, there was always the recognition that it would be difficult or different, to try to bring these kinds of absolutely transformational therapies to market would require, different go-to-market approaches, thinking about things differently. And, and there have been challenges, and I know we're going to talk about those. But I think, just as an industry, as a field, we should all be incredibly proud that we have these life-saving transformational therapies available now to patients that really have changed thousands of lives at this point, and that we are, putting together systems and approaches and ways to bring them to patients that can really work. And that we continue to look at ways to streamline and simplify that. I expect we'll probably talk about some of the, some of those ways and some of those complexities as we move forward. So anyway, I think that just is the first thing that should be floated. At a more personal level, it really was a thrill to be working on the Avalo program. That product was recognized with the Prix Galien, which is awarded every 2 years. It was for the best orphan therapy. And that was the first approved therapy. It's approved in Europe, not yet in the US. But it was the first approved therapy for relapsed refractory, PTLD. It's a rare lymphoma that patients can get after a transplant. With, very rapid and high mortality. So those are patients truly with no options, rare, but truly with no options. And, this is a product that's really having impact for patients and and their families. And now I'm proud that at Poseida, we're working to try to bring what cell and gene therapy can do to many more patients as we look at ways to work in larger disease states and to work on allogeneic cell therapy.
Fantastic. And what an impact to bring this therapy and be the first. I think definitely something to be proud of and paving the path for many more to come. Rob, can you share some of your reflections?
I mean, to go back further, if I may, Delara, than the last 5 to 7 years, if we look at two foundational moments or discoveries, accompanied by a ton of hard work that have really, enabled this field in a couple of ways. Thinking about the original CAR-T construction and thinking about vectorizing AAV. We think about those two pieces in terms of clinical impact. It's obviously, the former that wins as AAV is working towards still reaching its full potential. That original work to put together the original CAR construct so that it actually worked took well over a decade of pretty fiddly molecular biology, started by Mitch Feiner at Cell Genesis in the 1990s. I know we're going to come on to challenges. There have been some, tremendous successes in this field in terms of curative therapies or highly durable therapies being delivered to patients. As I said, I know we're going to come on to challenges, but I think scale and broader adoption are two areas we're probably going to focus on as we talk more about some of the work the field still has left to do.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Rob. And John?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll build a little bit what Rob said. I mean, in my career, I've had the chance to work on these life-saving, life-transforming treatments that have been remarkable with incredible qualities and ICERs in order to achieve reimbursement and chronic reimbursement, which has been terrific. What I'm most enthusiastic about, especially what we've been able to doing at VOR, is to finally have a chance for a promise of a potential cure, right? And we're working in acute myeloid leukemia. And I think the opportunity to deliver single-time treatments with the potential for a cure to not only provide, obviously, an incredible benefit to the patient, but as we all know, we also need to be improving the cost that some of these HTAs and payers are consuming chronically year after year trying to manage these patients. So I think there's also a huge benefit there.
Yeah, no, well said. And there's certainly a lot of ground to cover. I mean, a lot of things to be proud of, but I think everyone's touched on some of the challenges and things that still need our attention. So if we just maybe pivot to that, if we think about this industry and, bringing these incredible innovations to market, but at the end of the day, the commercial engine, right, building that infrastructure, Sarah, you talked about testing and really the ecosystem and the nuances for cell and gene therapies. So if I could ask you to really highlight, what do you see as the top challenges, right? The must solves in your eyes, right? For how you're touching the market in order to be able to successfully commercialize the therapy. And maybe, John, I'll start back with you to, share some of your thoughts there. What do you think are the really must solve areas?
I guess a couple of things. I mean, some of the things I'm going to say are going to be a little obvious, but I think they're important. We've all had success in other areas before we brought it to cell and gene therapy. But I think this notion of starting with the end in mind, being very clear upfront at the beginning stages of who your target population is, how large that is, the speed at which you're going to be able to get into that target population, I think is important. And then that works its way into knowing what your target product profile is, understanding exactly what the attributes that you're trying to achieve in that profile, and then that making its way into whether it's generalized cost effectiveness models or some type of cost modeling, and doing some of that early to think about what is it that you have to achieve first and foremost. And then finally, and again, kind of working backwards, what do you need to prove in some of these pivotal studies? I think we're getting better at that. But I think a lot of the cell and gene therapies are very, very narrow niche focus in a very small subset population. And the model, the business model around that is difficult to achieve. And honestly, it's probably difficult for partners and investors to get their minds wrapped around that unless you're really being able to communicate from the beginning stages. No, this is a a larger population that I'm going to get into, and here's what the economics look like of that, that I'm going to be able to prove that out just like I'm able to do with a monoclonal antibody or something else, that path to successful commercialization, an actual model that you'd be proud of and you can build up, start thinking about that from the very beginning.
Yeah, no, it's really great points, John. And, as you think about putting some of the process in place, right, of commercialization and bringing in the key stakeholders, but also really unpacking, what's your value prop, as you pointed out, as you look at that and you look at this, and if you link in some of the uniqueness of this market,
Yeah.
how do you look at approaching maybe that commercial process in a cell and gene therapy?
Well, I mean, it starts with the value prop is that, the discipline that you apply to anything else, like even on a monoclonal, you apply the same way here in many ways, where you start with defining the value proposition and building the modeling. I really kind of believe in building that early modeling now, whether it's a cost model or whatever it might be, and then figuring out and making decisions, right? Let's say you figure out this particular target population. You say, this is the model. This is what I think the benefits I'm going to be able to provide. You do some research. You figure out whether or not that's the benefits that physicians and patients are expecting. And then also being able to have the guts to make the decision, you know what, this may not be an opportunity for us, that maybe this is something we should not be investing in and redirecting your efforts somewhere else. I think making those early decisions in the pipeline planning and product planning process is important.
Yeah, maybe if I could jump in on that, because I think I agree with John. And, in many ways, the process is the same if you're, whatever type of biopharma product you're working on. But I expect probably a lot of people that we have listening today are from, emerging cell and gene companies, emerging regenerative medicine companies. And, you may or may not, first of all, you may or may not have staffed a lot of people into your organization with coming from that kind of background. You're probably starting with a lot of scientists, maybe some engineers and people doing operations. So, if you're an early stage company, you may be coming from a very scientific kind of mindset. And so in addition to, to pulling in the process and the mechanics of how you do this, like John is talking about, within your company, you also really have to be thinking about setting up the right culture and mindset. And it's not just education of external stakeholders that you need to do. You also, are educating and having conversations and dialogue within, internally within your own company. Well, yes, this is transformational medicine. These, cell therapies or, gene therapy vectors can do things that we never, really, that are exceeding our wildest dreams. But we still have to have a medication that people understand what it is, who are the right patients, when will they receive it, and is there going to be economics here that your investors can get behind? And how do you do that? The whole idea of a patient flow model or a revenue model may be very foreign to companies that are just coming together, are in the early stage. Maybe you're a research stage company. Maybe you're at the cusp of becoming a clinical stage company. So I would encourage people to think, a lot about, just how you start to, to embrace that internally as a company, as you're working on the work that you will then be explaining to your external stakeholders as well.
Yeah, Kristin, one of the first things I did when I started here is our CEO, Robert, asked me to do a seminar to the whole company about what commercialization is and some of the things we'd have to go through to think about in making some of these decisions. I very much agree with you that early education and understanding is important to prevent you from going way down the road for too long before making a pivot.
And Delara, I can totally add on to what John and Kristin were saying, the importance of bringing in the right skill set really early. And I add market access and I add patient engagement really early, because the sooner you get the real patient perspective and start to build that symbiotic relationship, you're going to have much better insights into what their experience is, because they are the expert in living with their disease or their child disease. And if it's rare disease, they've had a very long journey, and they've got very self-educated and powerful partners in your regulatory strategy and your approach. And then again, to emphasize the importance of understanding the market access and the payment systems and the HTA expectations, because in your commercialization, you're going to be going through your prevalent population in the first couple of years. So what is the long-term patient population you will actually be serving after those first couple of years? And what's the value proposition of that? And then how are you gating your quarter to quarter expectations when it's rare disease and they're hard to find? And so and this is where Wall Street is very interested to say, what is your ongoing infrastructure that's in place so that you're finding the patients predictably, and then the process in order to get them treated, and within what time frame? Because it's also time to treatment. There's the front end of finding them, and then once you found them, time to treatment is also a very critical component of building into your model, particularly when we had such a high sense of urgency to treat and find and treat the babies with SMA, because they would be, perishing. And our whole culture was built around that huge sense of urgency and purpose. And that can apply to, I think, every therapy area that we're working in. And so those are very important components of building out your organization, of finding, and then the speed to which you can build in your own organization, partnering with the regulatory supply chain infrastructure around the country for the time to treatment as well.
Yeah, no, and such key points. I mean, I think, when you look at the need for education, right, both internally, externally, the stakeholder management, and then that whole building of the ecosystem. And Sarah, you were touching on some of those key pieces, and John and Kristin talked about the internal element. But if I just pause on that and maybe double click. So Sarah, it's, to me, I when we were at meeting on the Mesa, and heard Tim talk about how many countries you and the team have successfully been able to go into, it really just gave me goosebumps. And that certainly was done with a lot of building the infrastructure, the partnership. So can you talk to that a bit, because I think it's hitting some of these key themes. But can you talk to some of the maybe practical things that you've done that would benefit the audience, and just what they can also do and replicate, but also what they can build off of some of that infrastructure that's now been put in place?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say we always approached when we were going into a country from the perspective of not only getting the gene therapy for SMA accessible and effective for our patients and their communities, we're also very mindful of the infrastructure in general that we were trying to establish for gene therapies to come in the future. That's why we were so dedicated to raise the awareness of, early detection and the economic value of treating early if you have particularly a one-time therapy. And particularly if you're working in a one-time therapy area, this is all new for many government systems to contemplate. A number of them, their HTAs aren't set up for this type of approach. Now, Novartis was always very forward-leaning in value-based outcome agreements. So they have a really good base of experience in working in that, and had a high tolerance for innovation. And I would say we even took it to the next level. We have fantastic market access experts that we worked with, and my team were very closely partnered because of working with the governments in partnerships to get the understanding. But we were very open in talking to any country. That's why I said, coming from a humble perspective of meeting them where they are. And then also what I recommend is to take an entrepreneurial spirit with every stakeholder. Be open and creative of what could be possible. We had some countries that their HTA systems were not going to be able to be adopted in time. So we had countries set up special funds for rare disease that they funded that we were then able to go through in order to start providing access so they could get experience and understanding of like, what is their exposure? How many doses should we make available per year? And then we could experiment and work on that as it matured in their country. So I would say never underestimate any country because we were always pleasantly surprised. And again, with our sense of urgency to find these babies wherever they were, to be creative and work with countries, even outside of the box of their current systems, to see if there were ways that we could, create a pilot to start providing access.
No, that's fantastic, and really, I think had such a huge impact. Kristin, if I can turn to you, I know, as launching the first allogeneic cell therapy, and as you look at the market and the need for education, I know when we spoke before, you mentioned the need to educate across the journey. Can you talk to how do you see that need, and how does it manifest in the way that you would engage from a commercialization standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot, a lot of directions to go with education here. Maybe somewhere that I'll start is, building on some of the things that Sarah was talking about, and this idea of the ecosystem and partnerships. So, commercialization is not just, the last mile and launching and then, in market sales and revenues. And we've already started to touch on that, right? John talked about starting, with the end in mind very, very early. Well, all the way along, you're going to be engaging different types of stakeholders in the ecosystem. Physicians, patients, but also regulators, market access, payers. And these technologies and products are new, really new to a lot of them, just like Sarah said, right? Everybody is learning together. And so, I would make a call out. You have a little bit of a different perspective, maybe if you're a big pharma company, but if you're at a smaller company, you cannot expect to have, nor can you afford to put all the expertise that you need in-house in internal resources. You need to find a really good network of partners, to work with, who can help you advance your mission of moving the therapy through development and into commercialization. And I know that's one of the themes that we're trying to get to in today's session here. I don't want to call out any particular names, but, organizations like yours, Robert, that provide very specialized expertise to cell and gene therapy companies. On the Avalo project, we had some incredible partners that we worked with to help us with market access. And we started very early. We took a long-term view, and we actually were able to get assignment to a DRG code before the product, well in advance of the product ever even being filed for regulatory approval, just because we, worked with the right people to be able to communicate the value proposition very effectively to CMS very early. So, I would counsel, companies, especially smaller companies, going on this journey, be very choiceful, do your homework, find good partners to work with. And, at least in my experience, that's been a really, really good model, because you're going to need to educate a lot of people. And you may not even know exactly all the ways in which you need to educate them. So maybe, exactly some areas, where that education is very helpful. So, I already mentioned payers and market access. I think, there's a lot of buzz in this area. Oh, it's challenging to get reimbursement and market access. These are expensive therapies, very difficult. I will say, I think with the right amount of legwork and, and that is considerable, but if you understand your insights, if you understand your value proposition, the things that John was talking about, you put that together in a coherent, clear, and simple way, payers will listen to you. They will listen to you. They understand, what value means. Look at some of the decisions from ICER. They've been very favorable, right? So, put in the time and be strategic about it. But I think there's more success through education possible with payers maybe than people think. I would also absolutely lean into the things that Sarah said about patients, and I would add to that physicians really need to be with you along the way. And physicians may not have a great understanding of these therapies. They've not been the workhorses in their toolbox, right? That they've been working with for a long time. They understand small molecules. They understand biologics now, right? They probably don't really understand, cell and gene therapies unless they've been, an innovator and one of the key thought leaders in the area with a ton of hands-on experience. And so really opening up that dialogue, making sure you're not surprising them at the 11th hour with, your therapy that's, now in a pivotal trial or on the brink of approval. What is this thing? I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical about it. So that's where your medical team is going to be, very key. I will say we've at Poseida really tried to bring in, MSLs to have scientific exchange, to really connect with the right thought leaders in the community. Right now we're working heavily in multiple myeloma, as I mentioned, and that program is in phase 1B. It's moving very rapidly toward, potentially pivotal trial sort of situation. It's really important that the medical community understand where we are and what type of product we're trying to advance and how that meets unique patient needs. And maybe another area to talk about is CMC, but maybe we'll talk about that later. So that's probably enough for now on the education.
Yeah, you've raised some great points, and Rob, I was actually going to come to you next because Kristin, as you talked about, the education of payers and how to frame the conversation and to put the data in a way that's digestible and understandable. Now, I would argue you really need that for all of the different stakeholders that you're educating, 100%. Which I think is so important. And Rob, when looking at some of the work that your team does, with a number of folks and being those experts that are kind of hired in to come help, and you have a vantage point across the market where you've helped so many, so you can bring a lot of those learnings. Yeah. Can you just comment on, the kind of bringing in the experts when you're coming in and how that's how you're helping kind of put these various data packages together?
Yeah, I'd like to build on some of the excellent comments that have already been made. Couldn't agree more with the comments Kristin's made regarding being intentional in partner selection, choosing partners that will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. The other side of the pincer, as I always view it, to building a cogent value proposition, I think, is around establishing a COGS model early. And we know COGS is a major challenge for the field. Coupled to COGS being a major challenge and trying to drive down COGS, I think understanding willingness to pay and how you demonstrate value beyond the data generated through an interventional trial, I think is really important. Something that's, critical for these therapies that they invariably often have either a single or limited opportunities for value capture. And I think understanding not just how you can drive down COGS and demonstrate value now, but as you work through development, which we can do, rapidly with these therapies with, designations from competent authorities that allow for acceleration, more frequent interactions with the agency. I think this demonstration of value in a potentially shortened time frame relative to the market that you're looking to enter and penetrate. So not so much now, but skating to where the puck is going to be in X years' time is really important. So what can you do from a COGS perspective between now and then? And to what extent do you need to drive down your COGS as you consider, early interactions with how physicians, to the points made a moment ago, will view and perceive this therapy relative to what will be, the treatment options in their quiver at the time that you work through pivotal trials and towards commercialization. And I think building this data package, building out the value proposition beyond safety and efficacy, as you look at durability, as you look at quality of life, really does round out how we're going to demonstrate value for these therapies, both in terms of at the time of licensure and at the time of seeking approval, and then also to what extent we can try to maximize value capture on approval, once these therapies are coded, and not then end up in a position where we have a cash flow problem, and then we're looking more at a Netflix subscription type of model of payment with amortization, as opposed to, acquiring the cinema ticket and trying to maximize value capture at the time of launch and at the time of, beyond approval.
And
Oh,
Delara,
excellent. Please, John, go ahead.
Kristin, I very much agree with your partnership comment that we're all kind of talking about, not only partners in market access and regulatory, in digital infrastructure, these things you don't need, and I have this experience, you don't need to bring in these kind of resources internally because you don't have the money for it. If you find these strong partners, it's amazing how much you can actually accomplish in anticipation of that. In addition to the MSLs reaching out to the centers and some of these key opinion leaders and investigators and physicians, but it's also the breadth of other cross-functional people at the centers themselves. Take the time to engage with whether it's coordinators, financial administrators. I think knowing and engaging with them as early as possible to understand the challenges they may have with what you're proposing is pretty important.
Absolutely. Now, the theme of partnership, I think, is so critical. I mean, we all don't know what we don't know. We have to stay humble, as Sarah said, but there's so much learning, and everyone's learning. And so, even in a broader organization, there is such a need to learn from each other and across the industry. But if I can pivot us to come to, I think, a topic that strikes fear in many hearts, and that is the CMC. So, as you think about building that data package, knowing some of the nuances of cell and gene and where, a robust data package is so important, but at the same time, there's a lot of variability. And maybe, Kristin, if I can ask you to comment, as you look at strategies to tackle the CMC, what is some guidance that you would give?
Yes. So a lot of thoughts here. The first thing I would say is start immediately, right? So it's very tempting to say, hey, we have this, emerging medicine. We're going to, run it into the clinic, and you can do that. Of course, you need, GMP product supply, but in cell therapy, there are some things you don't need. You actually are not required to have a potency assay, for example, to start a phase 1 trial. So you can move into clinical development. And I think that's frankly where a lot of people's expertise is. If you're coming in, you've maybe worked in other modalities before, that's not to say that designing the right clinical development plan isn't critical. It is. It's highly strategic, and you can make or break products in clinical development, absolutely. But I'll be provocative and say, I think the industry does know how to develop, design and develop products, do the right trials in these various different diseases, right? You just have to be thoughtful about it. But CMC is, in these areas is new. It's still evolving rapidly. It has been, it has slowed down and stalled many companies very late in the game if you have not really worked through CMC from the beginning. So at Poseida, we have been, completely maniacal about trying to move CMC in lockstep together with clinical development planning. I'm going to blame that in part on my original training as a biochemical engineer, right? Uh, but you need to make that investment. You need to put attention into that area, or you can find yourself in the position where you've got great data in the clinic, but the health authorities are going to say, we want to see more. You're not all the way there yet. So starting early is one thing. And I would say again, finding people who will challenge you, accessing the right expertise, and to channel Sarah, being humble about it, right? So invite in people that are going to say, you know let's take a look, let's see what you're doing well, let's see where you might have some gaps, and let's make sure that you're working on preparing those things now so this doesn't slow you down later. I think the final thing that I would say is, it's not a choice for everyone. It's been very successful for us to have, we've invested in this relatively heavily. So we have a lot of process development. We have our own GMP facility right on site in La Jolla, and we do all of our manufacturing right now for our clinical stage products, in-house. That allows us to have a very close and ongoing dialogue between process development and manufacturing operations, which we've found very beneficial. But at some point, you still have to scale out, right? So, I would say then also looking ahead to what's going to be that ultimate scale up to commercial scale and how are you going to do that is really important. For our lead myeloma program, that program is partnered with Roche, which has been a fantastic partnership. We've been very excited about that. And we've been working closely with them, for the partnership is over 2 years old now, basically the whole time, talking about this and, getting things prepared so that tech transfer will be successful when it comes. And I don't mean just like polite conversation once a quarter. This is intensive cross-training of staff, really investing the time to make sure that we're going to get that right.
And I'm so glad that you raised that. I think the clinical component for sure, right? And really pressure testing, as you've very nicely articulated. The manufacturing, from clinical and the readiness for commercial and transferring. And there's so much in that transfer that is so key. And Rob, if I can come to you, I know that we've had conversations around manufacturing, which, particularly as you have an eye to scaling and commercial manufacturing. So if you can share maybe some lessons learned there that would benefit the team here as well.
In addition to, a comment I made a few moments ago around building a COGS model early, because we need to be able to protect a sustainable margin. I think, some of the points Kristin's just made are excellent. Characterize your process early and document that process, even at early stage, in industry standard formats like process flow diagrams, etc. Build your TPP, build a QTPP. One of the sayings that we often hear in this field that we continue to beat the drum around and try to, strike an arrow through the heart of is that the process is the product, which we fundamentally disagree with. That, the product is deeply characterized. Otherwise, challenges like comparability as we work to scale, we work to move our process from one location to another, will not be overcome. Things like starting to address the challenge, as Kristin mentioned a few minutes ago, you don't need that potency assay to move into a first-in-human trial. But these products can be challenging to demonstrate reproducibly the mechanism of action for. So start early, take some pain early. Think about things like comparability and potency, right from the start of when this product is heading its way into the clinic. And something else we always advocate really strongly for is keep retains from the work that you do in process development and the early work that you do in GMP. Without those retains to refer back to, comparability is either going to be a nightmare or insurmountable, and time is going to cost you money. And just as importantly, if not more importantly, it's going to delay access
to what could be life-saving treatments for patients who are in desperate need. So I think, some of these pieces, like following standard industry accepted formats and tools, like characterizing your process deeply, with process flow diagrams, where you document out the reagents you're going to use, think about the suitability of those reagents, those equipment, those processes, and also the analytical methods that you're choosing to employ. One area where we see a real bottleneck for products, going through licensure and then heading towards commercialization is around, the QC bottleneck, where methods can have been adopted that represent, slow, laborious turnaround times. And that really does stop the therapy getting to the patient, which has got numerous obvious impacts. So there's some of the key things that we always stress strongly with clients. To Kristin's point, you can't start these things early enough, in terms of building out your PD and AD strategy. Face up to the numbers very early and work out what you can do to try to make those cogs more palatable and get them to the point that they need to be. And then this investment, as Kristin mentioned as well, in PD and AD, you can't kick these things too far down the road, given how long they take to do and how rapidly these therapies, want to be able to move through development as well. And there's some of the things that, we stress strongly with clients. Invariably clients are highly receptive to receiving support for these challenges, which can be difficult and can take time. But the pain of not addressing them early really hurts if you leave it too late.
Hey, Delara, can I just add one perspective on this?
Please.
And Robert and Kristin, you're so correct, because getting the process, it leads to the success. It also is building trust. It builds societal trust.
Yep.
Not only with our investors and the healthcare systems, but these patients and their parents are making the decision to take a risk, to take one of these very new and innovative therapies, and perhaps inject their child. And what would be the future? What happens in the future? And so when we're confident and it's predictable with the process, that it will be there, how is it made? How will it work? These are all critical components for our patient and the families to make the decision to either switch the therapy they're currently on, or to take a chance on these very new and innovative therapies, and sometimes what they perceive as unknown future. And so to get this right is not only for commercial success, but it also builds the trust in our industry and the therapy going forward.
Yeah, another thing I would just tag on to the end, agree with everything, especially what you were saying, Rob. I mean, the COGS planning now, look, I think we're all facing that cell and gene therapy is going great, but there is, some hesitancy, and a lot of it's because it's hesitancy around being scalable, right? Is this a scalable business that can deliver? And I think the early planning of COGS and how this is going to happen, I think is critical, and how we communicate that externally, that there is a plan, that we are going to be able to scale this. This is a business like you'd think of other businesses, in a big pharma company, that, this is something you can really build upon, I think is critical. The other thing I mentioned, that I know we talked about this before, but we're all familiar with this, this EU net HTA and these joint clinical assessments, all the things we talked about in the beginning of this meeting about value prop and your target population, right? We are really going to be under the gun to figure all of that out early in order to be prepared to launch anything in Europe going forward. So going the country by country basis, Sarah, that we all have experience on HTA by HTA, but now it's going to be more of this early stage across JCA that's going to cover across multiple countries that you've got to get right from the beginning.
No, thank you. Thank you. And a lot of important points. Just very quickly, I mean, I think all the points that were made around, the management of COGS, which comes down to your process and having that important characterization, the comparability, the retention samples, I think, Rob, is a very key one, right? Having those to be able to do that comparability. But it's also really important to be thinking about your commercial manufacturing, which is not the same considerations as your clinical manufacturing, and being able to do it at scale and to be a commercial supplier of a therapy. And Sarah, you said it perfectly. The patients are counting on us. Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of other stakeholders that are paying attention to that continuity as well. So I think that's an important element. I'm very cognizant of time. there is one area that we haven't touched on. We've danced on it, but I'd like to just talk about is the investor community, right? I mean, investment and fundraising in this space continues to get a lot of attention. And, maybe Kristin, if I can ask you to comment on, what are some of the strategies in talking to investors and making sure that you can secure that investment, and what advice can you give?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an important topic. And the last few years have been challenging for this field from, an investor appetite perspective, or it's been like a patchwork quilt, right? There's been, some companies that have been very successful and able to secure funding, and then, many others that have struggled. I think the first thing that I would say is right now, the pendulum has probably swung as far as it ever has toward a focus on assets, not just platform technology. So make sure you have, one or more things in your pipeline that you really think can be a medicine, because investors right now are really struggling to value platform technology. Everybody kind of appreciates that it's important and it's probably underpinning what you're doing, but they need an asset that they can build, a quantitative model, just like John was talking about, that's going to put it all together. I think, credibility and reliability of the management team always matters. So, do people have experience? Does the company hit the goals and promises that it makes reliably? And that comes back to some of these operational issues, right? So, such as manufacturing. Can you manufacture the product in the right quantities, but also at quality? In cell therapy, there have been struggles, been getting somewhat better, but there have been struggles with, being able to manufacture product reliably for all patients. Been trying to take, an off-the-shelf allogeneic approach in part to cure that and to bring down COGS as well. But, but that's a big issue. If you can't supply the product, it's a problem. If your data is not meeting expectations of the TPP, like John is saying, it's going to be a problem. So I think right now, it is difficult because you need to convince investors you've covered all the angles. You have thought through, yes, I have a value proposition. Yes, there's a sizable patient population. Yes, I can manufacture it reliably and at scale. Yes, my clinical data is, going to be X improvement over the future therapeutic alternatives that are going to be out there. And we have a bunch of people who can credibly pull this off. It's a lot. It's a lot to prove. And it all has to center on there is a medicine that is going to come out of this pipeline.
Thank you. I think a lot of really great advice in dealing with investors, but also just looking at the approach to development with an eye to commercialization with the end in mind. I know we're at the very end. Maybe just one last comment, and Sarah, if I can maybe close the panel with you. And, we started with very patient focused, and I think we're all here because we're trying to get these therapies to patients. Maybe what is your last maybe call to action to this community, particularly with that patient in mind, of what we can do to make sure that we're treating more patients?
Yeah, absolutely. I would suggest, as Jamie Metzel's book, we're experiencing a super convergence of genomics, biotechnology, and AI. And I think our community here is absolutely leading the way. And, we're such experts in the science and the technology to really make sure that we're utilizing all of that's available to us. And those partnerships with the patient, the family at the very beginning, and they're perfectly aligned to help move all of this forward. So many we all see the possibility, but it's so new, it can be scary. And it's our job to help build that confidence in everything that we're doing. And what an amazing time and an amazing opportunity to be a part of what's happening with this transformation of medicine, and to keep the patient at the end, the absolute focus. And we all say that, but working in this area, it's imperative, and it's really the most rewarding thing that we can do. So I wish everyone the best in all of your adventures, and I just ask for perseverance and optimism as we move forward, because it's all worth it.
Absolutely. Very well said. Thank you, Sarah. And I'm truly inspired by what all of you are doing. And I'm thrilled to partner with you, and really thank you all very much. And again, a big thanks to the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine for letting us have this panel discussion. Thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.